2, 3, 4.
5. That's right, Jin. Sorry, bud, but we're doing 5 tips in this video. Today, we'll answer the question of what happens when a YouTuber doesn't know what subject to make a video about. The answer is, they find a creative way to make a video about everything at the same time. I've got 5 tips you've never heard of for each different subject in the game I could think about. So you get 5 tips about minions, 5 tips about objectives, 5 tips about runes, and you get the point. With the concept of the video explained, let's not waste any time getting straight into it. Roll intro.
My name's Rogue and I played League of Legends professionally for 7 years. Now I'm a full-time content creator and coach for all ranks Iron through to Challenger. So if you want more information of what a coaching session with me will look like, you can find more information by following the link in the video description below.
And while you're in the description, you'll also find the link to my Patreon where I post all of the recordings of my best coaching sessions in full. With almost 1,000 hours of content currently available, all sorted by role and rank, including sessions where I coach for professional level teams, you can get a glimpse of what pro level league looks like from the inside. That's why whatever you're looking for, you'll easily be able to find something that's going to help you improve, no matter your rank. Let's start off the video with our tips about neutral objectives, and I want to open this one up by answering the biggest question in modern day League. How much is taking Atachan worth? Well, in order to find that out, let's break down what you get from killing it. Firstly, plain and simple, you get 50 gold per person and some kill reward, adding up to 275 gold instantly for your team. Nice. Secondly, we've got to talk about all of those flowers you've been picking up around the map. They aren't for nothing. They give your entire team AD or AP depending on what you're using most, as well as some XP every time you pick one up. Taking Atachan instantly awards your team with 10 more, and in addition, it sucks up all of the roses currently sitting on the floor around the map and it gives them to you and your team. So you'll usually get between 10 to 15 extra by taking Atachan, depending on how many there are. Another thing it does is increase the reward for all of the flowers you currently have and that you will get for the rest of the game. Now, obviously, this makes it pretty hard to start to calculate. Not only do these flowers have diminishing returns, but the amount you have varies depending on how many you've collected in the game. So in order to give us an answer, I went through and watched a ton of completely random games to find an average. An Atachan taken shortly after its spawn grants each member of that team about 9 attack damage or 14 ability power on average depending on what they're building. This means each member of that team gains about 300 gold worth of adaptive force, which adds up to about 1500 gold worth of stats when spread across your entire team, so we'll add that onto the board as well. Next, we've got to talk about XP. Since the flowers you get from taking Atachan give you XP, and the 25% amp is also applied to that, you gain a ton of XP by killing Atachan. When spread across your entire team, each member gains, on average, about half a level, so you're getting about 2.5 champion levels worth of XP by killing Atachan. At this point in the game, a level up is giving you about 600 gold worth of stats or so we're gaining about 1,500 gold worth of stats from these level ups across our whole team. But just know the real value is most of the time going to be much higher than this, because you also have to factor in that we get points in our abilities and sometimes more than 2 people get a level up at once. This brings us to a total value of at least 3,000 gold worth of stats that your team instantly gains by killing Atachan, which is pretty crazy. But we still haven't factored in the buffs yet. You also gain the Spiritual Putrefaction buff, which makes it so that your kills cause enemies to explode, slowing and damaging nearby teammates, which is obviously super valuable in teamfight, but sadly I can't apply a gold value to. Just know it's pretty good though. This buff also makes it so that you receive a flower, and thus receive bonus XP and adaptive force for all champion kills for the rest of the game. Not to mention that 25% buff to all of the flowers you get stays on your team forever. So whilst the instant value of taking Atachan shortly after its spawn is worth about 3,000 gold or slightly more, plus the buff, the value it has scales with the game time, as your team gains more kills and thus more flowers that are amplified by that 25% buff that you now permanently have. In short, I thought Atachan was really strong, but it's way stronger than I realized. It's not quite as strong as Baron, but it is way, way, way stronger than taking any single random dragon, and if you're trying to trade kills or towers for it, don't bother. Moving on, and don't worry guys, future tips won't take that long to explain, I promise, otherwise this video will be 2 hours. Something I almost never see people take advantage of is the fact that assisting in a Rift Herald kill grants you empowered recall. This isn't exclusive to the person who gets the last hit or to the person who picks up the eye. Everyone on your team who has dealt damage to the Rift Herald gets the empowered recall, so it's almost always worth a quick detour to hit the Herald just once if you see your jungler doing it. On the topic of Rift Herald, did you know it actually does more damage the later into the game you summon it? Well, technically it does more damage based on its level, and its level is dependent on the average champion level in the game at the moment where you do summon it. So essentially that means that if you hold off on using the Rift Herald, it will deal more damage when charging into turrets later into the game. Maybe if you're some kind of rocket scientist, you could hold off on summoning her until after Atacon is taken, since as we learnt, the bonus XP from Atacon would increase the average champion level in the game, and thus cause your Rift Herald to have more health and deal more damage once it's summoned. Now that is rocket science. Another Herald tip I have for you is that if you're not using it for side lane tier 2 towers, you're trolling. Side lane tier 2 towers are worth more gold compared to any other tower on the map, giving you 700 gold when you take it down. So one of the best Herald uses you can do is to... You know what? Why don't I just show you instead? Watch this confuse everyone. Who's ready? Alright guys, let's get the tier 3. Come on. Oh shit, I missed. Oh no, where am I going? It's actually macro movements, baby. We're going top lane. Just like that. And we get top tower. Because they all walked bot side, because that's where they saw me running with the Herald. But then, it was a diversionary play. We actually go top lane. And we get the top tower. Good stuff, boys. Good stuff. This clip was taken from my Field to Challenger series, where I'll be doing educational commentary to teach all roles that I'm doing over on my stream. To catch that, go follow me on Twitch. Link in the video description. For our final objective tip, we're going to talk about towers. Yep, that's right. Towers are objectives too. Now, for the first 14 minutes of the game, we have turret plating. The way that turret plating works is that every time a tower gets lower in health and loses a plating, it then gains increased armor, and so you do less damage to it. The lower in health the tower is, the more armor it has. In addition to this, there is a second buff. When a tower plate is taken, the tower gains a temporary armor buff for 20 seconds. Now, the mechanic we're interested in is the fact that this armor buff is bigger depending on how many nearby champions there are. If one person takes the plate, the tower gains 20 armor. If 2 people, the tower gains 40, and so on. This means that as towers get lower in health and plates are taken, you essentially deal no damage to towers anymore, unless you deal true damage. The tower damage buff that Void Grubs gives you causes you to deal bonus true damage to towers when you hit them, and true damage of course cuts through this massive armor buff the towers get. So as a PSA to all support mains out there, stay back when your teammates are taking turret plates to begin with. Not only are you stealing gold from them if you hit the tower, but you are actually slowing down the rate at which the tower is being taken by hitting it, since you're dramatically increasing its armor by being in range when the plate dies. The best thing to do is to instead hang back for the first plate or two that is being taken. Then you can come in at the end to help finish it off with the bonus true damage you have from the Void Grub buff, since you deal true damage to the tower that now has a lot of armor. Moving on, let's talk about runes and teach you some of the cool things about them. Firstly, let's talk about bone plating. Are you ready to have your mind blown? Bone plating only reduces damage taken from one enemy, meaning if the enemy Nautilus hooks you, triggering your bone plating, and then the enemy ADC attacks you while the bone plating is active, the enemy ADC deals full damage to you, as the bone plating only reduces damage you take from the enemy who first procced it, which in this case would be the Nautilus. So keep that in mind, especially in bot lane, because it might not be doing as much as what you think it is. That's something I didn't know my entire pro career until the very end, and when I found it out, I was so tilted. Now moving on, let's talk about rune shards, specifically the choice between scaling or flat health. Which should you take? Well, if you play jungle, top or mid, the answer is scaling health in 99% of situations. This is because the point at which scaling health becomes more effective than flat health is when you reach level 7. As a jungler, you're most likely going to do full clears until you're level 4 anyway, so you've already dodged half of this weak point of the early game. And as a solo laner, you hit level 7 at about 6.5 to 7 minutes on the game clock, which is very early on. For ADC, the answer is likely the same. Scaling is probably better most of the time, but sometimes if you're versing something scary like a Pyke Draven lane, you might be better off opting for flat health in order to survive the early chaos. Finally, on support, the answer is 99% of the time, you want to take flat health. While the solo laner hits level 7 at about 7 minutes or sooner, supports hit level 7 generally at about 11 minutes, meaning you have to play a much larger stretch of the very important early game at a disadvantage compared to solo laners do, because they get solo XP and they don't roam as much as what you do. Remember, League of Legends is a game where winning early makes it easier to win later. It's as if scoring a hoop in a basketball game put a 5 kilo weight vest onto the opposing team. You can imagine, after you land 6 hoops, your opponent can't jump anymore, so the game is GG. So take flat health on support unless you're versing something useless like Sona Yumi bot lane and you can just scale for free. Another small trick to remember is that with the legend runes in the precision tree, you get a stack assisting in the killing of the neutral objectives. Just like how you get empowered recall by hitting Rift Herald just once, you will also get a stack of your precision runes if you hit Dragon or any other neutral objective for that matter while your jungler is doing it, even if you don't get the killing blow. Another easy check you can do in loading screen is to simply check your keystone against what the enemy has. If you have a stacking keystone and they don't, you instantly win long fights, which leads to really simple solo kills like this one. Now I basically want to challenge to a 1v1. Wait, look here. Can't do that. Can't do that, my friend. So that, quite simply, is what you call lethal tempo advantage. You see lethal tempo stacking keystone versus free footwork? You just win. Oh, just like that they FF. Stacking keystones are really important to take note of in bot lane specifically, because if you see lethal tempo on an ADC, you must focus him first in fights, otherwise he'll be left a free hit, fully stack his rune, and just kill everyone, which is why I'm so quick to engage here. If the enemy responds by attacking me, my Tristana will fully stack her lethal tempo and trade back a double kill. But if they respond by attacking the Tristana, well, there's no reason why I can't just be in melee range hitting them for free if they're going to ignore me, which is what makes this engage such a checkmate position for them. Often, this means that the best counter to a hook support when you're playing an enchanter is to stack defensive summoner spells, item components, and runes, and then just block the hook for your ADC who has lethal tempo. That way, all the support has to do is die slowly to give the lethal tempo ADC the chance to stack their keystone, free hit, and trade back kills. Unlike what you get when playing with the fleet footwork ADC who watches their support get hooked and just does nothing and they die. The end. Finally, for your last tip on runes, there's been a lot of hype around Spellbook on supports recently, and I think it's time for me to finally weigh in. Runes like Spellbook, Glacial, Phase Rush, and First Strike are what I like to call payoff runes. They provide utility, but not much direct fighting power, meaning that especially early in the game, you are immensely weaker compared to people with other keystones. These types of runes are awesome to take when you can get away with them. On Rakan, for example, Spellbook is an amazing rune against something like Braum or Yuumi where you get a free lane, but against something like Draven Nautilus that has incredible early game fighting power, you need to take Guardian, otherwise you just go 0-10. The same is true for someone like Syndra. Against a boring mage, you can probably just take First Strike and scale into the late game, but against Ignite Yasuo who goes for a level 2 all-in like a psychopath, you're going to need something like Aerial Comet so you don't just get steamrolled early on and end up like that photo I showed you earlier of LeBron James with a bunch of weight vests on. We don't want that. This trick of how to choose between utility or combat power keystones is also a really good transition to talk about our first subject on the item tips. Let's imagine you're a support who walks into lane and boom, you get a solo kill. Good job. Okay, you go back to base, what should you buy? Well, if you just got a solo kill, you're at an advantage, so you most likely already win fights based on your ADC's gold lead and your XP lead. So you should most likely opt to buy early boots in order to help you get into range to engage on the enemy and fight them more. Now let's imagine you're the other guy, the guy who just died, that is. Well, you're working at a gold deficit now, so most likely you should instead buy a ruby crystal or a cloth armor, as you need all the combat power you can get since you're now playing at a deficit. Being greedy and buying boots when you already lose a fight is just going to be burning more combat stats, and you're probably going to be LeBron James. Another itemization tip that's gained some attention recently is to buy item components that give you the best short-term power spike, even if they don't build towards the item you currently want. For example, imagine you're playing Draven and you're building towards the item Collector. You've already bought Pickaxe and you've already bought Serrated Dirk, and on your next recall you base with 1000 gold. Logically, you would buy the Crit Cloak, right, and then walk out of base. But everybody knows that buying a Crit Cloak is nowhere near as powerful as buying more attack damage early game, especially on something like Draven. So what's better to do is instead buy a Pickaxe for a short-term power spike. The downside of doing this is that if on your next recall you can't afford to complete the Collector, you'd be really sad as a result, but likely you're going to be able to make 1000 gold to finish it anyway before you base. And that pickaxe you bought can just be built into your second item later on anyway, so you're not actually delaying any core items if all goes well. The bonus though is that for this next sequence out of base, you have a much stronger item component in your inventory, so you just become stronger in the short term and most likely won't end up harming yourself at all in the long term. This might be even easier to visualize when building something like Youngthal. Imagine you've completed the Scout Slingshot and the Longsword, but then you die and you only have 1200 gold with nothing to sell. Your options are, you either walk out of base with 1200 gold, or you just buy a pickaxe. And you turn that pickaxe later on into an infinity edge anyway. And that way, you actually have some power and don't walk out of base with Bill Gates' entire net worth in your inventory and then just get rolled. When playing champions like Nocturne or Viego who have multiple choices for their builds, there's a really good rule to follow in order to land on the correct one. On Nocturne, for example, you could build full lethality and one-shot people, or you could go a bruiser build with items like Stridebreaker and Steric's Gauge where you get a little bit more health. So which one should you go? Well, the best indicator you can use is by looking at how much crowd control the enemy team has. If you build full lethality and get hit by a Lissandra ult or a Rakan charm, you will just instantly get one-shot and crowd control, and that'll be the end of it. Tankier builds work really well against crowd control because the extra defensive stats allow you to live through the CC long enough to be able to either get away or at least use your cooldowns before you die. Specifically for bruiser type champions, this is awesome because you can get a bunch of extra health from bruiser items and then build the item Steric's Gauge. Steric's Gauge not only gives you a massive shield that'll help you live through the burst of crowd control, but it literally gives you tenacity. Tenacity is the stat that makes crowd control not last as long. So when you play against a lot of crowd control, you should get a couple of bruiser items first since the shield of Steric's Gauge scales with your bonus health. So buy some bruiser items to get some health, then buy Steric's Gauge so you have a massive shield and a little bit of tenacity in order to get through those team fights and make them non-navigable against high CC comps. Another thing that needs to be mentioned is that the support item gives gold two different ways and they are not equal ways to generate it. The item can store up to 3 charges that renew at the rate of 1 every 20 seconds. If you have a charge ready, hitting a minion consumes the charge and executes the minion, giving you 15 gold. But hitting a champion would also consume the charge, but it gives you more gold, 20 if you're a ranged champion and 22 if you're melee. Simply put, the best way to optimize your gold income from the support item is to simply never let it hit 3 charges, as you want the cooldown to constantly be cycling. Your goal is to prioritize hitting champions to consume charges because it gives the most gold possible, but you need to make sure to keep below 3 charges at all times. If you get to 3 and you can't hit a champion immediately, you should simply take a minion. It's better to get slightly less gold from your support item by taking a minion, because it's more important to be constantly regenerating it in order to keep it below 3 stacks so you're properly sequencing it. Now I only gave you 4 tips for this section, so for your 5th I'm going to recommend you go watch my latest video I made all about itemization. I'll leave a link to that in the video description and you can watch it after this one finishes, but before you go do that, let's finish off our final section and let's make it a little bit quicker paced tips. We'll learn all about minions and minion waves. PSA to all mid laners, do not roam and leave mid lane open on a cannon wave, ever. Cannon waves are worth the value of 3 melee minions, so you're losing an additional half a wave by not catching it. You're also leaving the most vulnerable tower open on the map in order to take free damage, and on a cannon wave, a lot of damage can be dealt to your tower. As a reminder, cannon minions have a passive that is exclusive to mid lane that gives them attack speed while attacking the mid tower. This simply means that if you leave mid lane open on a cannon wave in order to roam to a side lane, you lose an absolute ton of tower damage and also a ton of golden XP. There are 3 things you should always consider before leaving mid lane open: cannon waves, void grubs, and AD champions. If the enemy has none of these 3 things, you can roam and lose basically nothing. If they have one of them, it starts to hurt and you take some tower damage. If they have 2 of these things, leaving mid lane open is inting and you should never under any circumstance do it because you'll lose too much. If they have 3 of these things, you lose your entire tower in one wave. And I'll flame you if I ever find out that you did it. So do not do it. If you can, holding just 1 or 2 minions outside of your tower can give you a really good wave state going forward, as your arriving minions out of base will stop to fight those minions that you're holding, meaning the enemy wave will walk to the center of the lane, find nothing to fight, and then walk straight to you, leaving the wave resting just in front of your tower in a super safe position, rather than landing back in the center of the lane where you're much more vulnerable. In bot lane, staggering recalls is absolutely broken and can easily help you set up a freeze in the early levels. Check out this short clip taken from my stream where I mind control my support into pulling off this trick with me. I tell my Karma what to do, he's going to hold the wave if they push. Now I take cheat recall, I buy a longsword, I should have had Cole, but... And now Karma, all she has to do is hold the wave. Because it's a cannon wave, it takes them a really long time to push in. I'm always going to get back in time. And if Karma can hold the wave out of turret and maintain a freeze, it's really good. Tank, tank. Yeah, there you go. Bang, just like that. Bot lane is GG. If they chase in the wave, He has no HP. If they don't chase in the wave, they base with a freeze, I go up half a level. Nice. So really good early levels. Just like that, baby. Huge advantage. We love hidden passives. Well, there exists another hidden buff that most people don't know about. A jungler's jungle item has a hidden passive that causes them to receive dramatically less XP from minions at the start of the game. It starts at 70% less XP earned from minions early on and then scales up over the first 20 minutes. So PSA to all junglers, get the hell out of XP range of minions that die in the early game. You are leeching XP from your laners and hurting them massively by doing so. Also that you can get XP that is being massively penalized, so you barely even benefit from it yourself. Finally, one of the smallest but single most impactful tips I can give you is that you should reconsider the way you look at cannon waves in the early game a lot. Cannon waves do a lot of damage. They even have a passive that causes them to do 6% max health damage to other minions, on top of their already insane damage. This means that if there is a cannon wave arrives to your lane and your opponent isn't in lane, do not attack the wave. Even if the wave is slow pushing towards your opponent, they will still lose a massive amount of minions, since their cannon minion will be one-shotting absolutely everything in the wave. By just last hitting and leaving the enemy cannon creep alive as long as possible, you can deny almost a full wave in just a couple of seconds against an opponent who isn't in lane, and that lost XP matters a lot in the early game. Now, as a final bonus to cap off this video, I need to clarify something because it has been tilting me for the last week. A week ago, I posted a short on YouTube. It has 1 million views, and across all of my other social medias, it adds up to about 1.5 million views. In the video, I'm playing as Blitzcrank, and at one point, I say this. See the death timers right there? If Talon's dead, and Maokai's dead, and Yumi's dead, but I'm already halfway out of base spamming W, doesn't that mean that I get to the river before them? Almost every second comment on this video is full of people talking about the fact that because Blitzcrank W slows him after the initial movement speed increase wears off, that it equals out and you don't actually gain any increased movement speed out of base, so spamming W out of base is useless. Guys, have you ever heard of the item Swiftness Boots? Swiftness Boots reduce the effect that slows have against you, so in the end, I am definitely making it out of base way faster by spamming W because the penalty just isn't that bad. Had to get that off my chest, it was tilting me too hard. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Go check out the video description where you can book a coaching session with me or watch the sessions of others over on my Patreon. As always guys, have a great day.